We are continuing our series in Luke this morning, and we're looking at Luke 23. As we approach Easter next Sunday, we're looking at how Jesus faced the cross in Luke 23. So it's in page 1070 in your blue Bibles, and it's going to be on the screens behind me. Luke 23 from verse 26. As they led him away, they seized Simon from Cyrene, who was on his way in from the country, and put the cross on him and made him carry it behind Jesus. A large number of people followed him, including women who mourned and wailed for him. Jesus turned and said to them, "Daughters of Jerusalem, do not weep for me. Weep for yourselves and for your children. For the time will come when you will say, 'Blessed are the barren women, the wombs that never bore, and the breasts that never nursed.' Then they will say to the mountains, 'Fall on us,' and to the hills, 'Cover us.' For if people do these things when the tree is green, what will happen when it is dry?" 2 other men, both criminals, were also led out with him to be executed. When they came to the place called the Skull, there they crucified him, along with the criminals, one on his right, the other on his left. Jesus said, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." And they divided up his clothes by casting lots. The people stood watching, and the rulers even sneered at him. They said, "He saved others. Let him save himself if he's the Christ of God, the chosen one." The soldiers also came up and mocked him. They offered him wine vinegar and said, "If you are the king of the Jews, save yourself." There was a written notice above him which read, "This is the King of the Jews." One of the criminals who hung there hurled insults at him. "Aren't you the Christ? Save yourself and us." But the other criminal rebuked him. "Don't you fear God," he said. "Since you're under the same sentence, we're punished justly. We're getting what our deeds deserve, but this man has done nothing wrong." Then he said, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." Jesus answered him, "I tell you the truth. Today you will be with me in paradise." My talk today is called How to Face Attacks. How to Face Attacks. We all face attacks in life. Sometimes they're indirect. You feel under attack because of the challenges, the opposition you face. The hits just keep on coming. There's hassles at work. Maybe your exams didn't work out quite the way you hoped. Or there's tension at home, tension with your children, maybe tension with your parents, maybe tension with your brothers and sisters. You might face financial troubles or a health battle, or it might be in a spiritual sense. You long to take step forwards in your faith. But every time you try and take a step forward, it feels like the ground you're stepping into is contested. But then there's also attacks which are very direct and very personal. Someone criticizes you. Someone has a go at you. Someone accuses you of something that you haven't done, or they question your motives. The project fails or a deal goes wrong at work, and you feel like you're in the firing line. Or maybe it's closer to home. Someone misunderstands something you say or do, and a relationship which matters a great deal to you feels like it's hitting the rocks. When that happens, when you feel under attack, it can feel like your world is being turned upside down. It can feel very unsettling, because the thing is, you have no control over when and where the attacks come. And when they come, I often feel I would give anything for an easy life. Like when you're in the midst of it, you feel like, I would just give anything for an easy life. You kind of look around you, all your friends, your family, you think, they all seem to have an easy ride. Why don't I have an easy ride? And you think, just to not have a life free from attacks. But the truth is, the only way to avoid attacks is to say nothing, to do nothing, and to be nothing. If you want to make a difference with your life, if you want your life to make an impact, you're going to face attacks. They come with the territory. I find it fascinating that Jesus said to his disciples, says to us, love your enemies. There was never any question that we would have enemies. And actually, Jesus is fascinating because he knows what it is like to face every kind of attack. Physical, spiritual, emotional. Jesus knew how quickly people could turn from adoration to attack. He comes into Jerusalem and they're praising him, but within a few days, he is dragged off in the middle of the night to an unjust trial. His friends desert him. He's sentenced to death by someone who is convinced of his innocence, and he's dragged out to be executed. He faces unjust criticism, false accusation. His motives are questioned. His character is assassinated before he is killed. So what do we learn from example? What do we learn about how to face attacks? Well, the first thing we learn is to keep your compassion. One of the things I find remarkable about Jesus is as he's facing the greatest trial of his life, he's under huge pressure, he's in extreme pain, he's about to face the physical and spiritual isolation of the cross, and yet his focus doesn't seem to be on himself. His focus seems to be on others. There's a crowd following him as he's dragged out to be executed, a group of women who are with Jesus to the end, and they are mourning and weeping for him. And Jesus is actually concerned for them because he foresees, the trouble that's going to come to Jerusalem in the years to come. And so he says, don't weep for me, weep for yourselves. And actually, most of the words Jesus speaks on the cross are out of a concern for others. His focus is outwards to others, not inwards to himself. Jesus kind of responds to attacks with compassion. And I find this quite challenging because if I'm honest, and I hope I can be honest with you, if I'm honest, when I'm under attack, when people take a pop at me, my focus is completely and utterly on myself. I'm concerned about me. I want to protect myself, defend myself, my position, my status. And compassion doesn't sound like a good idea. I'm wary of showing weakness. Compassion feels weak to me because if you show weakness when you're under attack, then people might take advantage of you. Surely when you're under attack, that's the time to really project strength. But actually, Jesus stands firm, but he never strikes back. He shows compassion. And compassion means to suffer with someone, to feel someone else's pain, and even to experience the pain of others as though it's your own. That's what compassion actually means. And when we think about it, Jesus' whole reason for coming is compassion, to suffer with us, to suffer for us, on behalf of us, to take our suffering, the things we do wrong, on his shoulders. That's what the cross is, Jesus' compassion for us. And true compassion is when your commitment to a person is greater than the cost of bearing their pain. True compassion is when your commitment to a person is greater than the cost of bearing their pain. And that requires strength. Now, your passion is what you are prepared to suffer for. And Jesus was prepared to suffer for you. You're his passion. He came for you. And when you see his suffering, when you see how he suffered for you, it kind of empowers you to face attacks without being consumed by them and being aware of others. One tiny example. A little while ago, just a few weeks ago, I was at a Pret just down the road from here. Some of you might have heard of the coffee chain called Pret. And I go there quite a lot, and actually, the people at Pret, I see them so much, it's almost like their family to me. You kind of see them as much as some members of my actual family, and so on this day, but it was kind of a day where I had quite a lot of hassles, a lot of stuff on my mind. There was a few things going on, a few battles to fight, and so I kind of wasn't really in the mood for a chat. I kind of came into Pret, and I was instantly frustrated because there was a queue. The idea of waiting for anything, and actually, the guy in front of me in the queue I suddenly realized he was being quite aggressive to the poor Pret guy behind the counter. He's kind of, shouting at him, criticizing him, and it just seemed to be completely unjust. I couldn't quite work out what was going on, but it seemed like this guy hadn't done anything wrong. And I thought, maybe I should get involved, do something, but I had enough hassles of my own, to be honest. And you know how it is. Sometimes you feel like I've got enough of my own hassle. I don't really want to enter into someone else's hassle. And so instead, I thought I'd just be English. So I just kind of, stood there quietly and pretended that nothing was happening. But then this guy took a step towards the counter, took a step towards the Pret guy, and I thought, he's going to hit him. And that happens to be an area where I've got a little bit of expertise and experience. So I thought I'll just step forward just in case my services might be required. And as I moved forward, I think this guy became aware of me getting involved. And so he slightly backed off and he changed tack. And he called over the manager of Pret. And he said, this guy is the worst employee I have ever seen. He behaves terribly, rudely, obnoxiously, and you should fire him. And he kind of chucked his money on the counter and stormed out. And I was like, this is ridiculous. And then the manager, because he hasn't seen any of it, turns around and starts berating the employee. Customer comes first. And I thought, I cannot let this go on anymore. So I kind of stepped forward and I said, excuse me, can I interrupt? And the manager's like, another one? And so he says, yes. And I said, I just want you to know, I actually spend quite a lot of my time, and to be honest, almost all of my money in Pret. And I want you to know that this employee is the finest employee I have ever come across. He's so gracious, he's so kind, he's an asset to your company. If anything, you should promote him. And the manager's like, and so he just walks off because he can't really deal with the kind of, and the guy kind of turns to me and says, thanks. I said, oh, no problem, it didn't seem right. Anyway, we got chatting, and actually we've become kind of friends now. I chat to him most days, he gives me a free coffee. That's not why I did it. But the thing is, I had all my hassle, but as I walked away from Pret that day, do you think I could remember the things that were bothering me? Do you think I was at all concerned about the hassle that I brought with me? Actually, it all just kind of faded away. And sometimes in life, when people attack us, we kind of, a little bit like, you feel like you're carrying around a sandbag. You're kind of a weight that you kind of feel you have to grip hold of it to keep a handle on it, to keep control over it, because someone's attacked you. It feels like this is your burden to bear, and because of that, you kind of feel like, well, I can't really help anyone else because this is my stuff. I'm under attack. I'm bearing the burden. And so say if someone else comes along and they've also got a burden, maybe a slightly bigger burden than you, you kind of feel you're so focusing on yours you can't see it. But if you understand that actually Jesus has compassion for you, Jesus sees your suffering and bears it with you, that sort of frees you to look around and maybe to see what someone else is facing. And then you can kind of get involved and kind of say, let me help you with yours. And help them with their suffering as well. But the thing is, as you do that, you loosen your grip on your own stuff. And in a funny way, that's the only way you're ever going to heal. By leaving that to God. And so, as Jesus has compassion on you, you can have compassion on others, and that actually helps you with what you've been holding so tight. Thank you, Sam. The thing is, when you're under attack, though, every instinct within you is saying self-preservation. So you have to remind yourself, keep your compassion. The second thing you see from Jesus in this passage is to focus your forgiveness. I wonder how you respond naturally when someone takes a pop at you, someone has a go at you, someone takes you on, someone steps on your toes, someone invades your territory. Do you react instantly and retaliate? Or do you feel like the more moral approach is to kind of hold it in, just to kind of harbor resentment for a few months and slowly let them know they've upset you? Or maybe you're one of those people who's a bit more strategic. You wait patiently for the perfect opportunity to exact a vicious revenge. I don't know. But what I find quite moving about this passage is that as Jesus is dying on the cross, he's looking down, he's being insulted, mocked. He saved others, let him save himself. He's exhausted, he's wounded, he's struggling for breath. And he sees his enemies mock him. And in that context, Jesus' first words on the cross are actually a prayer to his Father in heaven who holds all authority and power in the universe. But his prayer isn't for himself, it's for his enemies who are mocking him as he dies. And it's to ask his Father to forgive them. Father, forgive them, they don't know what they're doing. And Jesus has said, forgive your enemies, pray for those who persecute you. It's one thing to say it, it's another thing to live it, and it's another thing to die doing it. Everyone thinks forgiveness is a great idea in general, But when you have to forgive someone in particular, for something in particular, then it becomes a little bit harder. When I was working as a barrister, a friend of mine, a senior guy, was organizing a conference for barristers all across the country. And he asked me to help out just to kind of, with a few of the things that were going on this weekend conference. And so one of the things I had to do was I got down on a Friday night to the hotel just to help people book into their rooms as they arrived. And so I had a little desk in the reception, and, I kind of give them their keys and help them get to their rooms. And I guess to all intents and purposes, I looked like a member of the hotel staff. And one of the barristers came back, and she was seriously agitated and upset. She was furious, and she said, "This is unacceptable." She kind of slammed her key down on the desk. She said, "My room is terrible. I want you to change it now." And I said, "I'm so sorry." And I looked, and there were no more rooms. And I said, "Oh, I'm so sorry." And she said, "I said now." I said, "Ooh." But the only thing is, there's no other room, so if I give them your room, then they'll have a terrible room. So I just need to take a moment just to work out. So I'm not asking you, I'm telling you, change my room now. It's like, rude. Like, And it suddenly dawned on me, and it shouldn't have made any difference. It suddenly dawned on me that she thought I was a member of the hotel reception team, not the friend of the guy who was organizing the whole thing. And she was getting more and more agitated. She was raising her voice. She was calling me stupid, which is true, actually, but, just in public. And it's probably why I felt so much sympathy with the guy at Pret. And just having a go. And then after a while, she just reached over and she grabbed one of the other keys, snatched it, and stormed off. And I was kind of sitting there thinking, I did not believe that. Here I am, out of the goodness of my heart, helping out a friend, doing this job, helping people get into their rooms, and she treats me like that, insults me, mocks me, is rude to me. And I started to feel that kind of comforting, warm feeling of complete moral superiority, like I am definitely in the right and she is definitely in the wrong. And then I spent, the next couple of hours, using all my kind of energy, my imagination, my creativity, thinking, how can I get her back? And I don't know, but you've probably never done this. I'm sure it's just me. But sometimes when you have a little bit of a fallout with someone, you start composing a speech in your mind of all the reasons why you're in the right and they're in the wrong. And it sounds quite eloquent in your head, and you think of all the best put-down lines, all the best cutting lines, the way that it will be used to maximum impact, just in case there's an opportunity, for their benefit, not for yours, to let them know how you really feel. And so I was going through that process, and then I suddenly realized I wasn't even going to have to do that, because that night there was a big dinner, everyone was invited, all the barristers, and because I had helped out my friend who was organizing it, I was kind of at the top table, and during his speech, I realized he's going to turn and thank me, and he suddenly kind of turned and thanked me in front of everyone, and you know how it is when you're thanked, you kind of have to do a little kind of, oh, thanks, and I suddenly thought, where is she? And I looked around the room, and there I saw her across the room, and I thought, right. And so as he said, thanks to Steve, my friend, who's done a lot of things, I don't think I've done that much, but done a lot of things to help out. And then everyone started applauding, and I kind of stood up to wave, say, thanks. But I wasn't looking at anyone, I was looking directly at her, like, hi, it's your friend from reception, remember me? This is my friend. And then look, it kind of went from kind of confusion to kind of shock to horror, basically, on her face. And, I'm not proud of it. Well, but in the moment, it actually felt really good. It felt so good. I thought, yes. But after about 5 minutes, I thought, why do I feel so superior to her? I've made probably far more mistakes in my life than she has ever made. She's probably just had a difficult week, and she was just taking out her frustration. Who knows what she's facing? And I suddenly thought, well, I'm not in any better position than her. The truth is, if you feel superior to someone, it's actually quite difficult to forgive them. And that's a silly example, but there's been times in my life when I've really struggled to forgive people. And I've had to be reminded, I have been reminded, of the reasons why God has had to forgive me. And that's changed things. I can't feel superior anymore. I can't hold on to that sense of, feeling offended, because God didn't hold back in forgiving me. And the truth is, the more thankful you are for your own forgiveness, the quicker you will be to forgive others. And if you're finding it hard to forgive today, and I understand how that feels. I've been there. I know it. If you're finding it hard to forgive today, it might just be you've lost sight of your own need for forgiveness. And it's so important because one of the most amazing things in life is to know that joy of God's forgiveness of you and to feel free to forgive others. And that's available today. You know, sometimes we find it hard to think that we can even be forgiven. But I want you to hear today, the truth is that the things we do wrong, our failures, they don't defeat God. They're the soil in which his forgiveness flowers. And so if you are struggling to feel forgiven, you're struggling to forgive today, I just encourage you this week, spend some time looking at the cross. Grab a Bible, look at the accounts in the Gospels, look at how Jesus died, look at why he died. You know, looking closer at the cross is the most practical, the most personal, and the most powerful thing you can do. To see that he was wounded so you might be healed. To see that he was cursed so you might be blessed. To see that he was mocked so you might be honored. That he bore God's judgment so you could receive his love. That he was forsaken so you might be forgiven. That he suffered so you might be saved. That he chose not to save himself in order that he might save you. And when you see that, when you see your life through the lens of the cross, it changes things. You see all of the mistakes you've made redeemed. All of the things done wrong to you restored. And it changes everything. It reframes every encounter. And when it gets in your heart, it enables you to focus your forgiveness even on your enemies. That's the power of the cross. And then finally, we see that when you're facing attacks, you've got to hold on to hope. You know, when you're under attack, you can kind of feel, when is this ordeal going to be over? When will the attack cease? How on earth do you have hope for the future when you're in the midst of the fight? Jesus is crucified in the middle of two criminals. And the first one joins in the mocking. Aren't you the Christ? Save yourself and us. But the second one has obviously seen something in Jesus while they're on the cross that has changed him. Maybe it was Jesus asking for forgiveness for the people who were killing him. And suddenly, he gets a sense of who Jesus is. He's suddenly more aware of his own wrongdoing. He's suddenly aware of Jesus' holiness, that he's on holy ground even there. And he says to the other criminal, don't you fear God, we're about to die. But we're punished justly for what our deeds deserve. This man has done nothing wrong. And then he says, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Such a simple request, a prayer of hope really, to look at someone who is dying and say, Jesus, remember me. Jesus, remember me. And the amazing thing is, though Jesus is facing death, he is full of hope. He trusts that he will go through death into life, that his Father will raise him up. And he can give that hope to this guy. And Jesus says, today you will be with me in paradise. What confidence. Today you will be with me. And that's not vague, that's concrete, because we know that Jesus rose. And when people rise from the dead, you can take their promises to the bank. They're dependable, they're sure. I wonder if you've ever prayed a prayer like that. Jesus, remember me. If you pray that prayer, there's assurance that it's heard. God remembers your sins no more, but he will never forget you. I mean, it might come as a surprise to you that when you kind of, on the final day, you're not going to have to introduce yourself to God. Like, hi God, I'm new here. Probably haven't heard of me. I'm called Stephen. I was born and bred in the beautiful town just north of London called Luton. Spent most of my life in London. Went to a church. You might have heard of the church called HTB. Even as you speak, he remembers you. He knows your name. It's hope beyond this life. But important though that is when you're facing struggle, in the biblical sense, when God remembers you, he calls you to mind and he acts on your behalf. It's not just hope for the future, it's hope for today, strength for today. If you're facing attacks today, don't give up. Don't be deterred from his calling on your life. Because when you face attacks, he will guide you. When you feel weak, he will strengthen you. When you feel close to despair, he will encourage you. When you face a battle, he will even fight for you. You only have to be still. So whatever you face today, you can face it with him, knowing that nothing, no attack of the enemy or anyone else can separate you from his love. Because what he has taken hold of, he never lets go of, and he has taken hold of you. He's taken hold of you. And so you can approach attacks with confidence, with hope. Why? Because the cross says his commitment to you is unbreakable. The cross says that you are forgiven and free to forgive. The cross says that you have a hope and a future. And the cross says that no attack, no enemy, no evil has the final word over your life, because the final word over your life is spoken by Jesus Christ. And it's a word of faith and a word of hope and a word of love. Today you will be with me. In Jesus' name, amen.
I'm Bear Grylls. My favourite way to start the day, the Bible in 1 year. That's how wild I am.
Find out more at BibleIn1year.org or download the Bible in 1 Year app.